zoom out on this map. Right now we're zoomed in on Iraq. And I'm going to zoom out. And now you can see off to the left there is the area that we're talking about with the Tigris and the Euphrates River flowing down to the Persian Gulf. So we've zoomed out from there. And you can see on the far left is the Great Sea or Mediterranean Sea, and Egypt down at the bottom left. So this is the region that we're talking about in our lesson today. I'm going to zoom out again just to show it in scale with the whole area of Europe. You can see the continent of Europe at the top and Africa at the bottom. And where the box is the proximate region of where we're talking about for our lesson today. All right, well, the beginning of Abram's story starts in Genesis chapter 11. So I'm going to start reading there. We'll read from 11:31 to 12:3. Terah took his son Abram and his grandson Lot, son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, and his son, who was his son Abram's wife, and they went out together from Ur of the Chaldees to go to the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. Now, Haran was the name of Terah's son, but it was also the location of the city where they stopped. And the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. So when Abram began his journey, he was actually traveling with his father and came up out of Ur of the Chaldees, and they were actually on their way to Canaan. But they didn't make it all the way there. They stopped and settled in a new place called Haran. Let's continue reading. Chapter 12. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those that bless you, and the one who curses you, who I will curse." The story of Abram begins with this wonderful scripture here that basically is God speaking to Abram. Now you got to understand, Abram was raised up in this area where there was idol worship. They had these stone idols that they revered as their deities, and they would bow down to them, and they would honor them, probably making sacrifices to them of some kind. And it was the center of their culture, it was the center of their households. This was their deities, this was their gods. And so for God of the Bible, the creator of the universe, living, loving, understanding God, to speak to Abram was something completely out of his experience. It was something that would have been a shock, something that would have been a surprise to him, to hear the voice of God when he's used to just having these stone idols that don't speak and don't talk and don't communicate, to have God speak to him. This was something very, very unusual and would have definitely caught his attention. So when God spoke, he called Abram. And this is what he told him. He directed him to leave his country and his family and embark on a journey. Now God offered Abram a destiny without specifying a destination. He told him to pick up and go, and he says, "I'll show you where you're supposed to go. Go to a land that I will show you." He didn't even tell him what his destination was. But this voice that he heard, this speaking into his heart, this was no idol. But it was telling him to go, and it wasn't telling him what he was going to find when he got there. But God promised Abram favor for his journey. He said, "I will bless those who bless you, and those who curse you I will curse." So he was telling him, I'm not going to tell you where you're going. I want you to trust me and follow me. But I will protect you on your journey, and I'll make sure that you are blessed as you go on your journey. When God spoke, this is kind of an image of an artist's depiction of what that event was like. And basically God, from nothing, from the clouds, not from a stone source, but from some place that depicting on paper was just a place that appeared from as if clouds, basically telling him to go. This is, again, like I said, unlike anything in Abram's experience. And again, as he directed Abram to leave his country and go, the stone idols that were there were not telling him to do this. God was leading him and telling him, come out and go away from this place. Directing him to leave, actually, the place where those idols were. And again, God offering Abram a destiny without specifying the destination. This was an act that required Abram to have some measure of faith. Am I supposed to go out and go to this place and not know where I'm going? Well, that's exactly what God asked him to do. He offered him a destiny, though. He said, I'm going to be with you, and I'm going to take you to a land that I will show you. So he said there would be an end to his journey, but he wasn't telling him where that was. And again, God promised Abram favor for his journey. So what did Abram do? He set out to go to this place that he didn't know where it was, and he began on his journey. And this, again, another artist's depiction of that journey. So I'm going to switch back to a map here and show a little bit about this journey that Abram took. Now, over at the far right-hand side, you see Babylon and Ur on the far right side. And that first part of the journey is the journey that actually his father began. Terah left Ur of the Chaldees, taking his family with him. And he was on his way to Canaan, which is over to your left. But he stopped at Haran, which is near the top. So from Nineveh to Haran, that first part of that journey was the one that he was compelled to take because he was with his family. But that was the start of Abram's journey, but he took that with Terah. So Abram's journey after the calling began after Abram left Haran. And as we read in the scriptures, we'll find that he went to a place in Canaan called Shechem. Now Shechem was a place that was very rich in water, palm trees. They would have had the fruits of things that they ate. It would have been grasses for their livestock to feed on, and for their sheep and their herds and so on to feed on. It was very land that was very rich. But he was a stranger in that land. Let's read in the scriptures, Genesis chapter 12, starting with verse 5. And when they had come to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the place of Shechem. And then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring I will give this land. So Abram built an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. This promise that God made to him when he came into Shechem was a promise that he would give his descendants this land that he found that was so rich. And it was a very wonderful promise. And a point that I want to make is that that promise that God gave to Abram, he would not have been able to give him if Abram had not started the journey. God told him to go, and if Abram had just sat there and done nothing, then he would not have ever been to the place, this town of Shechem in the area of Canaan. He would never have gotten there, and he would never have heard God's voice tell him, I'm going to give you this land. But because Abram took that first step and went from Haran to Shechem, then he received this promise that God was going to give his descendants this land. Let's keep reading. Let's read the next part of his journey, where he moved between Bethel and Ai. Genesis chapter 12, verse 8. From there he moved to the hill country on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and invoked the name of the Lord. This is a picture of that region. Some grasses, some hills, not as fertile of a place, but as Abram left the place where he received that promise that God would give him that land, he moved on to this region and he began to seek the Lord. He began to think about that promise that God had gave him. I'm sure he must have pondered this God who spoke as if from the air or from somewhere unseen, not like the idols that he had seen. And as he began to ponder and think more and more about God, we see along the way he built these altars. And he began to call on the name of the Lord and invoke on the name of the Lord. Let's continue on the journey. As he's exploring Canaan, he also stops at other places on the way to Negev, which is Canaan's southern desert. Genesis chapter 12, verse 9. And Abram journeyed on by stages toward the Negev. It's a very simple statement. But he would pick up tent and all his possessions and move along the journey. Now, Negev is a place, as it's approaching the open desert of Arabia, it becomes very desolate. Not very much there. Just some high step of, I'm sure, what would be very scarce grasses and so on. This is an image of the Negev.